So thank you so much for being here with us today and meeting the Women Awakening Project.
It's my pleasure.
Really, thank you so much. I would like to start from getting to know your story, and if there has been any moment in your life where you really started looking within or started your spiritual journey. How did it unfold for you? Yeah.
Well, I think everything has its context. And my parents were practicing Christians in a Baptist, non-conformist tradition. My grandfather was a Baptist minister. So what I'm saying is that the context was that I was in a home of practice. I think that made a difference. It was in my environment, and at times, of course, I reacted against it, but actually it sort of infused my being in one way. And I actually remember when I was about 12, my father giving me this book called Le Milieu Divin, the divine milieu. I don't know what milieu is in Italian. The divine milieu. And I was really, it just sort of opened my eyes, my ears, my heart to another way of perceiving the world about me. And at the same time, I was reading a lot of poetry and I started to read the mystics, and not just Christian mystics, but the Upanishads, the Gita, Dhammapada as a teenager. So it's almost as if there was something like a pervasive presence of, like an invitation that came. And I actually did have a particular experience when I was about 12 and after reading Le Milieu Divin, where I felt some kind of imperative to not ignore this experience. And it's strange looking back, I've never talked about it to anyone actually, but I felt this sense of I need to make a choice here. I need to make a choice. And all my life I've loved life, I enjoy the good things of life, want to do what I want to do, and I had this feeling that if I responded to this, it might not quite be as I would want it to be, as I wanted it to be, this. Anyway, that was the beginning of something. That was the beginning of something. And I think that kind of, there's been something like a dance going on in me since then, really. So that was at the beginning. I don't know how much you want to know, but there were one or two other significant moments. I mean, one of them was, because it ended up that instead of perhaps giving a little attention to music, which I loved, I ended up going to university and reading theology and religious studies. So that meant I was studying Buddhism and Hinduism, lots of interesting different religious traditions, as well as Christian theology, which in the UK is not just Catholic theology, but a broad-based approach, different theologians and different ways of looking at the gospel, including really trying to look at what was Jesus actually saying in Aramaic. So powerful, very different from the accretions and the later interpretations that, of course, have been given. So it meant that I sort of was doing that influenced that decision to do that. And then I went to live in India for a couple of years. Now, well, there were several very important in experiences I had in India. Yes. And just to quickly say that there were several meetings I had with women, spiritual teachers who were women, who really, really did influence me. And there is something important about context here, because women haven't had they've had a low profile, especially women teachers in many spiritual and religious traditions. And, some of the male teachers have big centres, or they had big ashrams. And it was a very different story meeting several of these women. I think I was just so fortunate to hear about them, because I heard about spiritual masters who were alive at that time, and I was very fortunate to have several meetings with men that I absolutely treasure. But I don't know quite how I got to hear about these women. They were more hidden away. I mean, one of them was, she was called Mother Krishnabai, and she had this tiny little ashram that she had, in India, this phrase of the mother. She had been supporting her teacher, Swami Ramdas, until his death, and then she became the main teacher there. But it was just a very small, simple place, and in quite a remote place. And I finally got there. I was travelling on my own at that time. This was in the 70s, so it was quite unusual to travel as a Western woman, or sorry, actually, to try and fit in. Look, as I was fitting in a bit. And I got there, and I was told, "Oh, Mother Krishnabai is very ill. You won't be able to have a meeting, darshan, sitting in the presence of, with Mother Krishnabai." So, having spent a lot of energy trying to find her and the ashram, I was really disappointed. But after satsang that evening, in this little tiny ashram, we all sang and joined in simple prayers. Somebody in the community, there was a small community there, came out and said to all of us there, "Oh, Mother will receive you." And I was so grateful, and I thought that maybe she will, give us a meeting. I didn't know how this was going to work. Anyway, what happened was we all got in a line and we walked through a little door at the side of this shrine room, really. I mean, no, the shrine room was probably the Buddhist term, but anyway, this little practice room. And we went in, and there was this very, very frail woman in bed. And she looked as though she was really, really ill. I mean, we went in only one at a time, into this tiny room with just a bed. And this little old woman who had no English and didn't look as though she had the energy to even hold a cup. She was so frail. She just rested her eyes on me. And I felt as though I'd been given a gift. Even remembering it now brings tears to my eyes, because it was as though I was receiving a gift, heart to heart. That's how I would describe it now, heart to heart. She was transmitting something in her gaze. And I was allowed, a moment or two just there with her. And I was completely, I didn't know what to expect. I was completely taken by surprise. And then I was ushered out and the next person went in. Well, to be honest with you, I had just never had an experience like that. And I remember going up onto the hillside, behind this little ashram afterwards, and just feeling completely disoriented. It was as though something had happened and my world would never be the same again. I was in tears too, and I felt fear because having been brought up in a wonderful, loving, but Christian family and studied theology and I had thought that it would be, how can I put it, Christians, saints. It would be in a Christian context that I would receive, if at all, some kind of, I don't know, I hadn't even expected to receive anything, but I hadn't had a framework for understanding heart-to-heart transmission. And I didn't know what had happened to me. And I was really thrown. That was one meeting with a spiritual teacher who was a woman in India in the 70s, Mother Krishna Bhakti. So in that same year, I think it was, I went to meet another woman teacher who again was hidden away, I think in Benares it was. She was living in an ordinary home context. Her name was Ma Anandamai. And you know the word Ananda means bliss. Yeah. I suppose that's actually what all these two women particularly were transmitting, something about Satchidananda. So that's truth, being. Chit is consciousness, awareness, and Ananda, bliss, Anyway, so I went to see her, and it was again some kind of, wasn't easy. I can't remember whether she was ill. Whatever it was, she couldn't see me. That I remember. But I was invited to write my question and send it in to her. Somebody would take it to her physically. In the door. The door was closed, but somebody would take them. So I wrote my question down and wondered how long I'd have to wait before it came back. The answer came back. It came back very quickly. I don't know that I feel I really need to share what exactly my question was. It feels very personal, but it was about how do I go forward with something, how do I do this in my life, a kind of basic thing. And about my path. And it was very brief. She just wrote, to do that, and she, my language, you have to know God. And it kind of cut through anything. It's like it cut through anything at a conceptual level. It was not a practical answer. It was not, oh, well, you could do this and that, and how about blah, blah, blah. It was like, well, you need to know God. It's like, know God, Here was I coming from having studied theology in UK and, absolutely useless at any concept of what this really meant. But I suppose over time, and learning particularly from this Eastern traditions, and that's why I left anything academic. It's like wisdom doesn't have to do anything to do with knowledge. It's direct experience. So whatever language we use, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, to know the divine, whatever language we use for that, is about direct inner experience and perception. So, in a way, that's what our journey, in our life is about. Because it's not just about, it's not a, God isn't an object to be known in that sense, more like the subject of our being. But again, that's dualistic language, but an inner recognition, if you like, an inner knowing, an inner knowing. So that was such a gift of an experience, really, because I suppose that's the journey I'm on and have been on since then. And that knowing is, it reminds me of what I said earlier about, I enjoy life and I do. There's something about surrendering all of me, allowing all of me to, as part of this journey of knowing, It's been important and still is, such an important part of my life. And there's something else I want to say about this, because there was a third woman teacher who, of course, was well known in those days, in the 70s already. And she's died now. Well, I suppose they've all died now. And that was Mother Teresa. And I was also very keen to go and meet her. And yes, I remember going to the Mother House, and again being completely taken aback, because I'd arranged to stay with, I'd got the name of a woman who was a head teacher in a school or something, and I'd spent the night there. But when I met Mother Teresa, I still remember the balcony where she was walking along and I was walking along. And she just looked at me in the eye and she said, "Oh, have you come to serve the poorest of the poor?" And it's like, whoa, I've only come to meet you, Mother, That was a bit of a facer, Have I come to serve the poorest? I don't know. It's like all these women, they just threw me. Every one of them. And she invited me to stay in the Mother House, which again was a bit going quite far. And I still remember that whole experience, because they didn't have a room. They didn't have any spare rooms, But I did really get a sense of the sisters, how they lived. And I was put up in this little tiny guest, I don't know what you'd call it, like a little, what do you call it in a monastery? It wasn't a guest room, it was the room, the public room where people could come in and meet Mother, really. So I was put in there with this little statue of Mary that remained lit through the night, and slept there and joined in their practices. And she sent me off to the Home of the Dying to be help the sisters. Gosh, I'm going to cry again. It was such a powerful, such a potent experience. These were women who really embodied this thing of knowing God, not I, but Christ lives in me, or embodying, how would we use it, another languaging, just that level of knowing, coming home to themselves at that deep level. Well, I use as people know, I use the word sacred nature. They were indwelling their sacred nature. And compassion wasn't something that they tried to do. It wasn't just an intention. But because they were embodying, indwelling their sacred nature, it just radiated. And that's a whole learning for me about, I suppose in Buddhist terms, ultimate bodhicitta. You know, we do our best, and you know, relatively we do our best. And of course, as women, it's so hard. The practice of self-compassion alone is really hard, but really necessary, especially and with others. But this knowing God, connecting with our sacred nature, then opens up something else, which is just the natural movement of the heart, the expression of this sacred nature, you know. So that was my third meeting with a woman practitioner in the 70s, and I'm still living with the effects of those meetings. Yeah.
Beautiful. Wonderful blessings. And can you share your take on the secret feminine?
Well, this thing of knowing God that I was referring to, that Mahanandamai had said, it's about my discovery as a woman that this is something very intimate and not separate from me, my body, Mother Earth. It's like if I really drop down in my experience, my embodied experience, there's something vast. There's something almost dark that opens up, that is holding. You know, it's interesting, I'm using an anthropomorphic word. And I think many of us need dualistic language. We need anthropomorphic language. We need symbols, we need imagery. And I think the mother is a more potent image for the holding aspect of presence for me and Father. Because I think in a way what I'm talking about is something I'm not qualified to talk about, and it is wordless in a way, but if I use language, there's something about what holds everything, and it's a womb. If you like, I could use the symbol of the womb, a vast womb, a dark womb of unknowing. You know, there's this wonderful mystical book in the medieval mystic in the English. Was it written in Anglo-Saxon? No, it was older than that. Yeah, the Anglo is more medieval. The Cloud of Unknowing. Well, I like the words unknowing, womb of unknowing, because it's going back to this thing of knowing, wisdom as knowing, but it being empty of. And it's non-conceptual. It's a direct experience. So the Great Mother, the Mother, the Sacred Feminine. These are terms which, in a way, for me, depict compassionate presence, but also something so unknown and vast. But it's also so tangible. It's not separate from the little things of life. I think that brings me back to something I want to say. All those three women were also so humble. There was humility in all of them. They weren't they just there was something emptied. They were emptied out into the fullness. And so I suppose I see the sacred feminine as this continuous, if you like, emptying out of a womb into what emerges in our day from our body, speech, mind, we would say in Tibetan Buddhism, body, speech, mind. It's like the source from which all this activity and doing and things and life and relationships come. But it's an emptied out womb, like they were emptied out women, I'm not being very clear, but
yes,
do you get some sense of what I'm trying to put into words? Because I think it has to do with emptying out, to do with the womb, to do with the darkness of unknowing, to do with such this compassion I spoke of as not as being inseparably linked to the dark unknowing, a compassion that comes from a dark unknowing. Presence, compassion, and also, although it's vast presence, there's some quality of holding. And you could ask me, well, what is the holding? I have no idea, but it's a sense of being held. And I think that informs my work. I don't know how it works, but some sense of a presence can hold. Thank you. You're getting me to think.
Thank you.